Hey guys, welcome to the Ramsey Paul Show. It is Saturday, August 30th, and I hope you're going to have a great weekend. This is Labor Day weekend. This evening, I'm going to a friend's, Dave, near Fort Smith, Arkansas, and his beautiful wife, and we're going to have some food. Really look forward to that. Uh, Actually, I'm going to leave in a couple hours, so I hope you guys have a great Labor Day weekend too. And if you've been following my show, you're like, hey, he's no longer wearing his glasses. Yeah, my right eye has actually improved. I don't have glass in here anymore. And the blood has drained out of my eye. And as of yesterday, they checked it. I have 20/20 vision in my right eye now with no glasses, contacts, anything. So I'm super excited about that. I still have a little bit of blood to drain, but really good progression there. On my left side, I have surgery on Tuesday, so I hope to be totally fixed up. Hopefully on Tuesday, they won't cause bleeding because I have glaucoma stents. That was the problem. After my surgery, I literally couldn't see out of my right eye except for light and shadows. That was it. It was like, oh God, I screwed up. But the doctor said it'll get better. Sometimes it bleeds, and when there's blood in your eye, you can't see. The body has to absorb it. So there is progress there. So I am it's good news for that. I'm in a good mood for that. And if you're new to the show, welcome. We do this every day. I say we, but my production team is me. I'm the producer, writer. I do everything. I'm not like some of these people that have a staff of like 30 people like quartering. I have my thumbnail person. I have my script writers. I don't have that. It's just me. And I kind of like it. It's like total control. So thank you for subscribing and following me. I really do appreciate it. All right. We will get into the news. The first story has to do, I would say the number one story is a federal judge has struck down some of Trump's tariffs. Federal appeals court, actually a lower court, if you remember, on April 2nd was what Trump said was Liberation Day, and he imposed a bunch of tariffs on a lot of countries. And a federal appeals and a district court at the time said, no, you can't do that. You exceeded your authority. And the federal appeal court this Friday said that many of the sweeping tariffs imposed by President Trump on dozens of countries are not legally permissible. And, I love Trump. I really do. And I like the idea of tariffs. I do. I think that helps to generate revenue. It helps protect our industry. Free trade has been a disaster. It's just gutted our country of manufacturing. It's hurt job employment. It started with the blue collar workers, but now you see even white collar workers with the Indians, the offshoring, and it's not been a net benefit. And we're seeing even national security risks now because we don't have the industry to fight all our wars. And I'll get to that in the next segment. So free trade's not the answer. We need tariffs. But the problem is, according to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 is really clear that the Congress is the only authority that can impose taxes and regulate commerce, including tariffs. So the Constitution is pretty explicit about this. Now, what happened, I think it was in 1977, they passed a act that said is called the IEEPA Act. And it has to do, it was in 1977, and it had to do with emergencies. So in an emergency situation, the president can deal with the economy directly without going through Congress. And they said unusual or extraordinary threats to national security or the economy, the president can take over. And this is always dangerous when Congress passes stuff that's emergency only, because you see in other countries where they cancel elections and they say, oh, well, we're still a democracy. This is just for an emergency powers. Of course, the emergency never ends. It's a forever emergency. So you don't really have the protection. It's tyrants do that. And I'm not saying Trump is a tyrant, but that's a danger when you're using emergency powers in this manner. And to be clear, the tariffs are still on. They delayed the implementation or getting rid of the tariffs. And I think the judge did this intentionally so it could go up to the Supreme Court, because this is a complicated matter. And what further complicates the matter is the difference between tariffs and sanctions. And those two are two different things. A tariff is just an economic thing where you're trying to generate taxes from foreign countries. They bring in their products, they have to pay a tax. You can say, oh, the consumer has to pay it because they have to raise their price. Yeah, maybe, but it's a tax. And it's a way to protect industry. So instead of sending jobs overseas or sending a factory overseas, a corporation looks at it and says, if we send this factory to Mexico because they have lower wages and we'll save money, but if we do that, we're going to be hit with a huge tariff and we're not going to have any savings. So if we just build in the United States, we won't be hit with a tariff. That's the idea of a tariff, and that's actually a good policy. I think we should do that with like outsourcing programming jobs, call centers. There should be a huge tariff hit on any of those type of things. We don't currently, but there should be. So I'm not against tariffs. McKinley had tariffs, generate a lot of revenue. This is how the United States government used to fund itself before the income tax. The early American government was created, how it was funded was through tariffs. So tariffs aren't anything evil. It's just this radical free trade policy, what sounds good, free trade, but it was a form of globalism that brings everyone down. Because, if you're a company, you're like, hey, why should I have to pay high wage to workers, let's say in Ohio, and then I have environmental restrictions and so forth, and safety rules. I could just send this to China or Mexico where the wages are less. They don't have any safety concerns. People die, big deal. And they just dump their pollution wherever. So we can do that as cheaper, and then we can sell it in America cheaper, and we'll have advantage over our competitors. Then the competitors, they say, oh, well, if they're doing that, we have to do that to be competitive. I know this actually, I was in the tech industry, and I had some ethical problems of taking over some companies and then firing the programmers and replacing them with Indians. And a lot of people, they understood. They go, yeah, this is probably bad for America, but if we don't do this, our competitor will do it. So we have to do it. This is where you have to have the government step in and say, no, this is harmful to America for many reasons, and we're going to put tariffs. So, but the problem is tariffs are designed to be approved just by Congress, not the president. Now, what the Supreme Court will have to rule on is this IEEPA Act enacted in 1977, what defines an emergency. And again, we're having the whole problem is the president can always define an emergency then, right? I think the act is flawed. So we will see if this goes to the Supreme Court, what will happen. Now, this doesn't mean that the United States can't have tariffs, but what this means constitutionally is Trump has to go to Congress and say, I want to implement these tariffs. Congress has to approve it, then Trump signs it, then yeah, that's legal. But the court says Trump doesn't have the power to do this on his own. And again, we're in a strange time trying to save this republic. And as I've said before, we got to fight fire with fire at this point. And maybe we're at the point that, the Constitution was a good thing to follow, but we're beyond that point now because our nation's under attack within. I don't know. You can make the argument, but this is what happens. And by the way, this is why, for example, presidents, they attack countries. In the Constitution, the president can't declare war. It's got to go through Congress. So, but they have these emergency powers where they can basically go to war without calling it a war. That's how, like, for example, Trump can attack Iran without going through Congress first. Based on the Constitution, it's like, no, you got to go through Congress. But we haven't done that for years, really, since World War II. And I think it's created a lot of problems. And let's see here. Trump obviously is upset. Trump gets upset easily, but he is upset here. So let's take a look at Trump's response to this court. And here it is. All tariffs are still in effect. Yeah, they are. They're not been removed until this goes to the Supreme Court. Today, a highly partisan appeals court incorrectly said our tariffs should be removed, but they know the United States will win in the end. If these tariffs ever went away, it would be a total disaster to the country, make us financially weak, and we have to be strong. I agree with Trump. These tariffs are important. I'm not opposed to tariffs, but I'm not sure if the court was partisan. I could understand. I'm just trying to be fair. You know, I love Trump and believe me, but I can also understand if I was a judge and I look at the Constitution, I could say, well, wait a minute. You know, you're using these emergency powers. Is there really an emergency? Because this, according to the Constitution, should be decided by Congress, not you. And we're not saying you can't have tariffs, but you got to go through Congress. And so this is what it comes down to. The U.S. will no longer tolerate enormous trade deficits and unfair tariffs. And he goes on about how tariffs are a good thing. But that's not really the point if it's good or bad. That's a separate argument. The argument for the court is it legal for the president to put on tariffs without going through Congress? The Constitution is actually pretty clear. The answer is no. But again, it gets confusing because in 1977, they made an exception to emergencies. But the problem then, obviously, is the president can always declare an emergency. So it's a way to get around the Constitution. It's sort of like in the Constitution, again, declaring war. It's got to go through Congress. So we don't declare war anymore, but we still fight a war, and the president calls it. So tariffs, that is an interesting thing. We'll have to see. This is going to go to the Supreme Court and see how they rule. And again, it's not the point of the court to figure out if tariffs are good or bad, at least theoretically. And I know judges, many of them are corrupt or partisan, but if the judge is honest, they're not supposed to look at it from a Republican or Democrat point of view. They're supposed to look like, hey, does this action violate the Constitution? And in this case, I think they have a pretty good argument because it's pretty well, I mean, it's clearly specified in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, that all taxes, commerce goes through Congress. So we will see what happens, but that was the number one story is tariffs. All right. Mike Pence, speaking of tariffs and sanctions, and let me just show you this. Whenever I see Mike Pence, it's really weird. I see someone that's like a caricature. It's like a caricature Republican from 1985. It's like he's been stuck in 1985 forever, and he still thinks the Soviet Union exists. He still thinks Reagan is president. He still repeats all the mantras like peace through strength and all that. And he's a big free trader. It's really strange. He even still wears a red tie and he dresses apart. Again, it's just really bizarre, but this is what Mike Pence is. And Mike Pence is a big believer in that we got to get involved with this war against Russia because of the dispute over the Donbass, which is crazy, but he's a neocon that supports that. You know, we got to stand up to Russia. I don't know. It's some sort of like, if they take the Donbass, they will take over New Jersey next. Well, I wouldn't mind. That'd probably be an improvement, but I don't really think that's going to happen. So here's Mike Pence. President Trump has opened the door to peace in Ukraine through diplomacy. Passing Senator Lindsey Graham's sanction bill would show Putin that America speaks with one voice and our entire country stands with the president as he seeks to end this war. And what he's talking about here are sanctions not on Russia, because we already have pretty much maximum sanctions on Russia. We don't trade with Russia, except for a few key things we still do some trade with Russia. Like enriching uranium, we no longer, except in very small quantities, have that ability to do that in the United States. And again, that's because of outsourcing. And enriching uranium is just not for nuclear weapons, it's nuclear power plants, it's also for some medicine. There's a lot of uses for it. But we have to import the enriched uranium from Russia. So we still do that. And so we're not going to cut that off. So there's not really any more sanctions we could put on Russia. So Lindsey Graham, he came up with this idea to put what they call secondary sanctions on. Because what happened, the idea was when the war started that, and remember, right after the war, remember the Russians invaded and they surrounded Kiev, and then the Russians didn't attack Kiev, they just surrounded it. Then there was a lot of diplomacy going on in Istanbul between the Russians and the Ukrainians. And in Istanbul, the Ukrainians and the Russians, they agreed to a peace deal tentatively. And what happened is when the negotiators came back to Kiev, Biden sent the British prime minister scurrying off. I think it was Boris Johnson, that mop-haired guy, to Kiev and say, no, we don't want peace. Tell Zelensky to reject this deal. We want to continue the war because we want to topple Russia. That was the idea. And so the peace deal, at that point, the Russians thought they had the peace deal, so they withdrew as a sign of good faith from Kiev. And then Kiev, the Ukrainians, they breached the peace deal. They go, no, we changed our mind. We're not going to do it. And then that started the long war in the Donbass. It's been slow, but a lot of Mariupol, I think, was the first major city that the Russians captured. And then there was Bakhmut and so forth. And it's been a very bloody war. But that's what really started that. And the idea is we'd put all these sanctions on Russia where they can't use the SWIFT system, and they can't have McDonald's or Starbucks in Russia. And this would create this, it caused the economy in Russia to crumble because Russia is a poor country. They're just a gas station masquerading as a country. They have nukes. That's the only reason. But that premise was false. They're actually a fairly wealthy country. Their standard of living now is higher than many European countries. Part of the problem is how do you track GDP? Do you, some Instagram whore makes millions of dollars. Should that really be part of the GDP? And compare that to factory production? We say yes, but I kind of dispute that. Russia's more about actually growing food, producing real items, and so forth. Their economy is not based on girls showing their private parts. So it's a different type of economy. But we thought these sanctions would cause Russia to collapse. It didn't collapse. In fact, the Russian economy, compared to Western Europe, like Britain, France, and even Canada, is doing quite well, in Germany. One of the things that has come out is England is in dire financial problems. They're in huge debt. They may have to appeal to the International Monetary Fund to get bailed out. France is also in a huge problem. Germany's in a recession. Canada, they're becoming a third world status. So these Western countries, they're importing all these third world migrants that just mostly bring violence and poverty. They're not enriching the country. Meanwhile, all these countries are funding the war against Russia, and these countries are becoming very poor, whereas Russia is doing quite well comparatively. And so the sanctions have not worked. And a lot of the people say, well, the reasons the sanctions didn't work is because Russia still trades with some big economies, mostly like China and India. And India buys a lot of oil from Russia, and so does China. And it's kind of funny because a lot of the oil India buys from Russia, they end up selling to other countries such as Ukraine. Talk about the roundabout way. So anyway, the idea was that, okay, well, Russia, what we got to do, Senator Lindsey Graham and others, they had this idea, well, what we got to do is make it so India and China doesn't buy oil and other things from Russia. But how do we do that? And so he had this idea, oh, we got to put sanctions or huge tariffs on India and China, like 500% or whatever. And then that way it would force them to stop trading with Russia. But India and China have both said that's not going to happen. They are not going to be bullied in that way. It's actually a provocative act. One thing, tariffs, that's a financial thing. But once you start telling another country, oh, you can't be friends with this country, otherwise we're putting huge tariffs on you, technically that's a sanction and that's an aggressive act. And China has basically said, well, okay, if you want to go that route, you could go that route, but we're not going to play that game. We're still going to buy oil from Russia. And if you want to put 100% tariff on, oh, okay, we'll stop, exporting our consumer goods to you. So when all these fat Americans go to Walmart, they can't find anything to buy. And, oh, by the way, your rare earth minerals that we refine them, America, you used to refine these minerals, but because of free trade policies by people like Mike Pence put forward over the years, all of that has been moved overseas. So we don't have the rare earth mineral refinement capabilities. We have to get that from China. And China said, well, maybe we just won't give you these rare earth minerals anymore. And these rare earth minerals are key to many things in the economy, consumer reasons too. But one of the big things they're used for is military purposes, modern weapons. And so it's a big dilemma. If we put a big, huge tariff or sanctions on China to tell them to stop buying Russian oil, what will happen is Russia will say, F you. China will say, F you. We're still going to buy the Russian oil. And good luck fighting the war, because I know United States, you want to fight all these wars. You're talking about fighting a war in Venezuela, your best little friends in the Middle East. I guess Israel's demanding that we be their bitch again and fight more against Iran. And you're going to need a lot of weapons for that. And sending weapons to Ukraine, well, good luck with that if you don't have rare earths minerals. And so we're kind of in a dilemma there. And long term, Trump is right. We need to bring the industry back to the United States, but that can't be done in like a year. That's going to take a lot of time, which, by the way, Mike Pence opposes. He's opposed to tariffs or protecting our industry. So we're following the advice of Mike Pence over the decades and the other neocons, which has led not to prosperity. It's led to people be very poor in this country. We're losing our middle class based on the free trade argument. These jobs have gone overseas. Key industries now are no longer in the United States. They're with our potential enemies. And now it's this guy, Mike Pence, is living in fantasy land. And you can say, oh, you're a Putin bot, a Russian bot. I'm like, no, just give me an answer. What do you want, Mike Pence? Okay, we put these sanctions on China. They're not changing their behavior. And then we lack the ability to get rare earths, which produce more missiles, so we can fight for God's chosen people another war, which, Mike Pence loves them more than he does America because he's a heretical Christian that rejects the New Testament. So, what do we do? It doesn't make any sense. So, but that's the neocon argument. It's really bizarre. They don't even think things through. They just say the same thing over and over. All right. The next thing that's happened here. This is a low IQ congresswoman, Maxine Waters. She says that we need to invoke Article 25 against Trump. There is no Article 25. I think she means the 25th Amendment, but she's kind of dumb to understand that sort of thing. So let's listen to her. Make her. This is always painful to listen to stupid people. Oh, sorry about that. Actually, shut down my camera for a bit. See, I blame my producer, but I am my producer.
Concern. We have to move very aggressively. It is not about, lingering and trying to think that maybe the courts will help us. I want, even though I know it may not happen, the cabinet that he's appointed, a bunch of his sycophants who probably won't do what I would recommend. It is time to call for Article 25.
There is no Article 25. This lady, she should be at this point in a Baptist church somewhere organizing the bingo night, for the Black community and other old ladies. She should not be in Congress.
Of the Constitution of the United States of America to determine his unfitness, to determine that something's wrong with this president. And
I've noticed the left, they lack imagination, because Joe Biden had a lot of issues, obviously, and a lot of people were calling for the 25th Amendment because Joe Biden didn't understand what was going on. He slept all day, and we were told it was a conspiracy theory, but now we realize Joe Biden has a lot of problems. He wasn't right in his head. So the left, they decided, oh, well, we'll just do what the right did and say Trump is that same way, when it doesn't make any sense. Because unlike Joe Biden, who would never take press conferences, hardly ever traveled, when he did with the Europeans, remember, he was trying to take a photo off, and then he kind of wandered off somehow, and he had to be wrangled by the prime minister of Italy. It's really embarrassing. I mean, anyone can see it. Whereas Trump, he takes long press conferences and he goes back and forth and debates with people. He goes to Alaska, deals with Putin one-on-one, then went back to Washington the same week, deal with that little midget Zelensky and all his European lapdogs. He had to bitch slap them. He was like the headmaster and all the students lined up. So you may not like Trump or whatever, but he's obviously well engaged.
I would suggest that we move very aggressively to talk about the danger to this country and to our democracy, and not play around with.
We're not a democracy, we're a republic, by the way.
Because this is absolutely one of the most destructive things that this president could do.
Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, I mean, your take on this, because I think it's jarring to hear Congresswoman Waters say it's time for the 25th Amendment. But I mean, presidents have been impeached for much less.
That's right. I mean, these people are so dumb. They're so damn dumb. They shouldn't be this is part of the problem. You shouldn't see people like this in positions of power. It's embarrassing, really. And so she doesn't know what an amendment versus an article is. She doesn't know. But she's, again, stupid. She's low IQ. What can I say about it? That's just all she is. And it's an embarrassment having her there. So, and if you remove Trump, you just have J.D. Vance, who I think is probably more based than Trump. So, yeah, whatever. All right, so here we go here. Now, the number 4 story. Let's take a look at this. It has to do with, this isn't a surprise, it has to do with birth rates, because this is a big problem in the West. New progressive have a birth rate problem. For all the talk of general fall in births, the drop is overwhelmingly driven by people on the left having fewer kids. By ceding the topic of family and children to the right, progressive risks being ushering in a more conservative world. So this guy is a leftist. And what is happening is leftists, they don't really have babies compared to conservatives. And that makes sense, because much of the left is not, and again, the modern left, what I call the woke left, not the old left, that was more about economic issues. The modern left, they're more about, let's pretend that a boy is actually a girl and let's castrate him because, he picked up a Barbie doll. We need to castrate him and say he's a girl now. And, we got to have abortion as our most holy sacrament, right? That's the other thing. And there's nothing better than homosexuality. We need to teach kids about that in schools. If you have that anti-life point of view, obviously you're not going to have many children. Whereas people on the right, they tend to be more religious, meaning in traditional Christianity. The left has their religion too, but it's more Satanism, to be honest, which is anti-life, pro-death. Whereas the conservatives are more about having a family and so forth. Not everyone, but I'm not surprised about this at all. And this is sort of a good thing. In many ways, the left, especially the woke white left, they are eliminating themselves. And the people that are having children are more conservative. And you're seeing this in a lot of nations. You're seeing this even in Israel. In Israel, the liberal left-wing Jews, they don't have children. Again, there's a lot of homosexuality in Tel Aviv and so forth. But if you look at the conservative or Orthodox Jews, they have lots of children. And we're seeing that a lot too. So a lot of this fertility issue depends on your politics. And again, if you're all into the LGBTQ, feminism, abortion, yeah, you don't reproduce. And in nature doesn't really care. If you do something that causes you not to reproduce, that whole ideology will die along with the people. Nature is all about survival of the fittest, what you do that can continue it. And by the way, that's why so many of the morality that we have, just forget the religious aspect right now about God or anything like that. A lot of it can be explained by evolution. Like, okay, the reasons we had restrictions against homosexuality and other practices, it turned out were just practical because societies that had certain sexual barriers, that sex needs to be in marriage because that produced children, but more than just children that are wandering around without parents, but they had a family to raise the kids, to be responsible. That produces a strong society, not some baby mama that just pumps out random kids. And so from that, you could argue that's how the morality came about. And the left, they try to break that all down, and they see a society where if you're a man and a woman want to live together, that's fine. If you're a man that wants to live with 5 other men, have gay orgies, that's just as good. And traditional societies say, no, it isn't just as good. It is destructive. And we're seeing that their ideology leads to death. So in the short term, many cases because of disease, but in the long run, it's a dead end. It's a dead end ideology. So that's the number 4 thing. And the number 5 thing, this is, again, our best little friends in the Middle East. They've been doing their attacks on people. And, oh, boy, we've gone 32 minutes already. There's always so much stuff to go through. I enjoy doing these. And let's just take a look at this. This is number 5 story. I'll go over this quickly. But what happens here is AIPAC, they should be considered a foreign organization. They do some loopholes that claim they're just American, but they're not. They're pro a foreign country. And they're trying to say that Marjorie Taylor Greene is just like the left, that she's anti-Jewish because she doesn't believe we should necessarily fund Israel or put Israel first. And as Matt Gaetz says here, this is the most fascinating expose of 2025. AIPAC thinks it's an attack on Marjorie Taylor Greene to accuse her of sharing the squad's unwillingness to be slavishly loyal to Israel. But what this attack reveals is AIPAC has so badly overplayed their hand that they now have real problems on the political left and right. And that is true. So we're seeing both on the left and the right, for different reasons, opposition, not necessarily to Israel, but opposition that we should put Israel before America. Now, again, there's different motivations. The people on the left, they tend to be more pro-Muslim, anti-white, and they see a lot of the Jewish people as white, oppressing brown people. But the people on the right, they're like, no, we should put our country first and not Israel first. Doesn't mean we have to be anti-Israel, but we have no obligation to fight wars for Israel. It's outrageous that they should, over the years, get the most amount of foreign aid. They're a wealthy country. They don't need it. They should not be controlling our congressmen or senators. It's outrageous, for example, my senator, Tom Cotton, is more interested in Israel than he is his home state of Arkansas. That's not the way democracy is supposed to work, but he's been captured. He's corrupt. He takes this AIPAC money, and we need to end that. And it's nothing per se about Israel. If it would be any other country, it would still be intolerable. If Hungary had, let's say, a similar organization where all of a sudden all these politicians were having to go to Hungary and kiss the statues there and proclaim their loyalty to Hungary above America and constantly talking about Hungarian issues, that would be an issue. That would be an issue. Oh, we need to fight wars for Hungary. We got to fight a war against Romania to help Hungary get back Transylvania. And to save Hungary invaded Transylvania and ethnically cleansed the Romanians. And then we said, oh, well, that's okay because Hungarians are God's special people. They can murder whoever they want, and God will bless us if we support those that murder Romanians. It's just batshit insane, but I would be opposed to that too. So that was the number 5 story. So again, the top stories of the day here. Number 1 was the appeals court ruled against Donald Trump about the tariffs. The tariffs stay in effect, though, until it goes to the Supreme Court. Number 2, Mike Pence and other neocons are advocating this crazy idea of trying to get us in a war with China with these secondary sanctions. Number 3, that low IQ Congresswoman Maxine Waters is demanding Trump's removal. Number 4 is showing data that progressives around the world, because of their embrace of LGBTQ and abortion and everything else, they're just not having children anymore and they're dying off. And number 5, AIPAC attacks Marjorie Taylor Greene, which isn't too surprising. Top 5 stories of the day. Guys, thank you for being here, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a good weekend, but I'll be back tomorrow. Talk to you guys later.